Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned at the top 245,000 cases yesterday, according to the New York Times map and case count. 3,600 people, I should say 3,611 people died. There were 113,000, a little more, who were hospitalized. Generally, the rule of thumb has been to take the figure, number of cases, multiply by 1.4% between there and 1.8%, and look out 16 to 21 days, and you will get that figure. Now, I went back, and it appears, at least, that if you look 16 days ago, figures were closer to 200,000 infections. So the percentage, the death rate seems to be on the higher end of that 1.4 to 1.8 range. And at one point, and we may be seeing it now, it's very difficult to tell from this data, we're going to get to the point where part of the death rate is a function of the inability for hospitals in certain areas of the country to care for everyone to the extent that they can, because they are over capacity. And so they begin to make choices. I suspect that is happening in some hospitals around the country. They don't necessarily advertise this fact, but it is the case that we are hitting capacity in many places. There was an unbelievable statistic as vaccines are rolling out around the country. New York City has vaccinated, I think, 5,200 healthcare workers as of today. In Rhode Island, over the course of a 3-day period, 1 in 325 Rhode Islanders got infected with COVID.
It's unreal.
And
over a 3-day period.
And essentially 1/3 of the state got infected over a 3-day period. It's obviously a small state, both geographically and in terms of population, but nevertheless, that is stunning. And there is no reason to believe that even as we sort of are plateauing, at least over the course of maybe the past 5 or 6 days, I would imagine there's going to be travel leading up to Christmas. We saw a Thanksgiving surge, and I would imagine we're going to see another surge, but we are at levels that are, in many places around the country, unsustainable. So be safe. Be safe. And there's today they're going to vote on the Moderna vaccine, the FDA panel, the advisory panel. And there's every reason to believe that they're going to approve it based upon what we've heard so far. We got to wait and see. If that's the case, expect the Moderna vaccine to be rolled out probably, I would imagine, starting Monday or Tuesday of next week. And
that vaccine seems to be quite safe from what we've seen. I mean, again, we're going to have to see how it plays out, but the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use similar technology.
That's right. And so it's going to take a couple of months, but folks got to take care of themselves. And this story, we will get to this story. It is shocking. The House Oversight Committee and its select subcommittee on coronavirus has found emails between the Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Stephen Hahn, also Michael Caputo, who was the Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs. These are political positions, incidentally. 6 other senior officials at Health and Human Services. The supposed science advisor, Paul Alexander, and I think his credentials are not stellar.
Well,
says infants, kids, teens, young people, young adults, middle-aged, with no conditions, etc., have zero to little risk. So we use them to develop herd, ... We want them infected. Now, herd immunity was only tried, or I should say herd immunity as acquired naturally as opposed through a vaccine, has only been tried, as far as I know, by one society, perhaps in the history, as a conscious policy in the history of pandemics, and that was in Sweden. And if you go back sometime over the summer, they realized we have made a horrible, horrible, horrible mistake. There has never been a successful public health policy to achieve herd immunity without a vaccine. The idea that they would implement this policy in secret is, it seems to me, if not literally criminal, as literal of a metaphorical criminal you can get. This is just, it's stunning.
Yeah, it's stunning. And we already knew that this was the position of the administration, even if they didn't say it out loud, like the way white supremacy is basically the stance of the administration, but they can't fully say it, so they'll just do little things behind the scenes that back up that ideology. I mean, herd immunity, Scott Atlas was brought in because he was in favor of that, and every action by the Trump administration showed that they didn't care about COVID. They were fine with getting it because they have unlimited financial resources and power and access to treatments that other people don't. And they wanted to pretend it didn't exist because they thought it helped Trump's chances of reelection. And that was the whole reason that they went with this. And so this was actually being quietly pushed. Just infect people, just infect kids. By the way, children, if they have pre-existing conditions, yes, it's rare, but they can die of COVID. It has happened. And of course, young people can die of COVID. Comas, horrible health risks, and psychological issues are being reported.
Here's a graph of Sweden in terms of COVID deaths per million people. I mean, it's way off the charts. And
you mentioned they came to their senses a bit on it, but it's still like harming them because
that's the problem, is that it's very hard to put this genie back into the bottle. Once you train people, essentially, and signal to them that it's irrelevant what you do. So we have a lot of data now from college towns where you can see the students go back, and even if there was zero risk to 20-year-olds, which there isn't, but even if there was, it is impossible to contain in a society. I don't know if there is a society where you could contain it amongst an age cohort, but in this society, it is not possible. I don't know what society it would be possible, but you can see in those college towns spike in deaths when college students come back into those towns.
It's also just crazy to implement this strategy without understanding the long-term effects of a disease that just came into the public consciousness at the start of the year. You don't know how it's going to affect people. And now we're seeing there are reports of infertility in men. Yeah. Is that okay if 20-year-olds get it? Mental health issues resulting from it. So many things we didn't know. Such an ignorant, insane position.
And this was done consciously and without the disclosure to the American public. And I honestly, it'll be interesting to see if there is really any type of like action that can be taken here. But certainly the Democrats should be making this clear that Republicans, lawmakers, administration officials, all, if not fully signed on to this policy, they certainly enabled it to be carried out.